still doesn't hit the mark.
We weren't really very happy when the production for season 1 actually ended.
We start to realize that our health start to decline.
It was a difficult time for all of us.
As weeks go by, things got worse.
Why are we even stopping at this one particular chapter for so long?
And looking back at it, man, I hate that couch.
We were on the hunt to look for a project that could bring us really very far, and I have to think of this one-liner that would fit into this project line. So what I thought of was actually the passion that I have for from the East and the West, which is the love I have for anime and animation. I thought about that, and then I went to look for Vince and tell him about that.
I recall the time that Wilson came over to my place and he was telling me about this concept that he had. It was in a Sunday noon, and we were just sitting down, and he was telling me about how much of content he can possibly do with this East versus West. But as much as we were exploring at the time, I was asking, what are we really talking about?
I said we can actually do a lot of different content. We can be battle content, it can be arena battle content, or even cosplay content as well. It's actually endless in terms of content-wise. At that moment, I was actually very inspired with webcomics, established webcomics, and I was thinking if that's part of what we're doing, if webcomic is it. And at that time, Vince was actually up to something else.
I was developing a personal development website, and since this idea came from him, I said, why not you take the time to make it a little bit much more solid? Why not you take the time to further mature the idea and see how it goes? Then we can really come back and see what we're going to do with this idea.
I have tons of ideas in my mind, and at that time, I figured that I need one main idea right after the conversation with Vince. So I got back into research mode just to figure this part out.
It was about a year since I last met up with Wilson, and we both have quite some stuff to share to each other. He shared to me this concept of a website he was working on at that time, and he definitely got my interest. But after that, we didn't really talk as much, but I still believed in his concept because it was quite strong.
I took a lot of references from Goku vs. Superman. I look into their ability, I read about their story, and even their battleground scenes as well. From there, I start to have a lot of ideas about how anime and animation characters should go up against each other.
He came back with the idea of comparing venues, battles, powers, storylines, basically anything to do with the East versus West, cartoon, animation, anime, comic superheroes. So there's a lot of stuff we can possibly use, but what are we really talking about? And if we're trying to do this webcomic, there must be a focus. So after much discussion and narrowing down to what we're trying to get into, that's how the MASH concept came about.
I was simulating a comic scene of Senyu and Mordecai. So these two characters that were going through a bank heist, I actually put them in a situation where they argued and said, if Batman was here versus Detective Conan was here, they could have escaped the scene better.
I was looking at the draft that Wilson did, and I gotta say, it's pretty interesting. And the more I look into it, hey, despite the fact that the characters are good and it has a good dynamic, it kind of has that Brian and Stewie kind of feel. And if we're trying to create this East versus West, there needs to be equality. We need to have contrast. The two characters that we're trying to build should look the same but different. So with that in mind, that's how we're going to build our characters.
So I look into a lot of references from anime and animation in terms of character design, and I picked from Naruto, I picked from Senyu, Family Guy, and even regular show. I took those references, I start drawing on our characters. Once I finish a sketch, I immediately show it to Vince.
After building the characters, we start talking about resources. Because the thing is, despite the fact that Wilson was able to create the first shot of how our characters look like, we weren't really able to draw more dynamic shots. We're just not that kind of people who are capable to do that kind of art. So it was at that time we realized that we need someone who can really draw. And luckily for us, the stars were aligned with Mel.
I was exposed to the character for the very first time, and I gotta say, it was quite fresh and interesting because it's like one of those posts you see in 9gag, but only it has more potential. So what I did next was I sketched a body for the characters and I added a bit more colors, and the rest is history. We all came together.
This time, I needed Mel to help me to draw the body parts out for Anakin and Akira. I gave him a few body reference that I actually wanted. Some of it from Futurama, Regular Show, Disgaea, and even Senyu.
So it was obvious that we needed a strong contrast between the characters because we needed to show the cartoon and anime side clearly. And at the same time, we needed them to be simplified.
I thought of a name and presented to the guys. The first thing that came up to our mind for east side is Akira, and I felt that was pretty much the fit for it. And we looked back into west side, we figured that it needs to be A as well.
The first time I was presented with the name Akira, I thought it was a ship's name. So it was really bugging me, and I pointed it out to Wilson and Vince.
We needed a name to be on its own to represent the western side.
I started looking into a lot of pop culture and games, movies, and one thing stood out. It was from Star Wars. It's Anakin.
We got both the name figure out, and at this point I was actually scribbling off Akira's name in hiragana, which in hiragana, A means ah. I wrote that down and I figured that pretty much fit for Akira as a name.
The concept of the website is about two guys fighting, so naturally Anakin versus Akira and eventually AVA. And MASH was our first content, so it makes sense for us to just put avamash.com. But naming the website like that was difficult because, first of all, we can't really explain that it's supposed to be AVR when it's spelled AVA. But eventually, we just decided to just let it be, and the magic will happen eventually.
It was about time for me to start drawing on the storyboard. It took me a day to actually figure out the story for Anakin and Akira. So what happens is, I put two characters into an apartment, and they was literally sitting on a couch arguing about the characters that they like. And I can recall the first ever content that we created was a match between Cell and Ultron.
The first frame was supposed to be an establishing shot for all of our MASH volume, and it's actually Anakin and Akira just sitting on a couch watching TV. But if you read our second volume, you can actually see that there's two repeated establishing shots with nothing on the TV.
When I first saw the first shot of the comic, I was thinking, man, why does it have to be like that? Webcomic is supposed to be something that is quick and fast, so you don't really need any establishing shot. And looking back at it, man, I hate that couch.
I was having a lot of fun during this process because we came up with a lot of crazy ideas on how to make the characters argue. And what was lacking was actually on the visual side. Our panels looked too empty. So we needed to find a way to fill our panels, and the silhouette was the perfect solution because it was fast and easy to produce.
At this point, we have already released 4 MASH content, and we were actually about to publish the 5th.
I took a look at what we have done, and despite the fact that we have put in some preliminary work and we have gathered our thoughts better to what MASH needs to be, but seeing it again at that time, we really need to step up the game and make MASH better than what it is. We needed to improve the product and bring it to a higher standard than what it was at the time. We needed to make it better.
So Akira was not anime enough, and when we decided to revamp him, we had 3 things in mind. He cannot look plain, he needs to be cosplayable, and he needs to look more anime. So what I did next was actually take a look into a lot of anime in games, and as you can see, his final design has a lot of inspiration from Kingdom Hearts.
Akira now looks more closer to what we want. He has some anime features. He also looks way much more like a Japanese character with the white hair. But the thing is that we put him comparing to how Anakin looked at the time. We call it Squanakin. I was thinking no one would really root for a guy with the mullet hairstyle. And he also looks like Professor from Powerpuff Girls.
So it was clear after pairing them up, Anakin needs to undergo a revamp too. But this time, he needs to look more cartoony and realistic. And that's where I searched for a lot of reference, and one art style in particular stood out. It was actually Steven Silva. His art style actually had the perfect amount of flexibility that I need for the new Anakin look.
We actually revamped the whole site and the logo as well, but the only thing left for us was the mesh content.
We need to do some things that are different from the first few versions of MASH that we did. The first few versions of MASH, we just pretty much put in the words and the speech bubble just as it is. So instead of doing that, what I was saying that let's take a look at how the professionals do it, or at least the proper structure and standard. So we research on how words are supposed to be placed, how speech bubbles are supposed to be used, and we did that, we followed that. And we also improved the visuals. Instead of making the silhouette 2 to 3 different colors, we just decided to make it like full silhouette with a little bit of effect and just one color with a gradient.
At this point, we were almost ready because we had the characters revamped and we had new content for the MASH. But what comes with it was actually the library for the characters. And at this point, everything was becoming very chaotic, but one opportunity presented itself. It's an opportunity for a new content.
We have a lot of artwork just from MASH, and they were just sitting there. So I was thinking, why not we use this artwork and we create something new, something that doesn't take too much of our time. Lighthearted is what we're trying to go with, and that's where the crazy stories of Shorties came out. It was supposed to be a quick, digestible content. We just basically have Anakin, who is a Western-minded person, encountering the culture of Japanese people, which is Akira side. And that's who we are, essentially. The three of us were like the Anakin. We're Western-minded people, and we hear about these crazy Japanese stories, and we wanted to put it into short comics. So we started production, we started the writing, and it just went from there.
So we have MASH, and right now we will work on shorties as well. So what we did was we split between weekdays and weekend. On the weekdays, we actually work on MASH. On the weekends, we actually work on shorties. So the week was really intense and was very heavy.
We were juggling between the two contents, and what I thought would give us efficiency actually gave us the opposite effect. It made everything very chaotic. So what Vince and Wilson actually suggested was for me to craft out a schedule for our weekly progress. And what I did was I crafted out the schedule with one thing in mind. I didn't want to get bored with the schedule. So it failed miserably because that we lost focus in what we were trying to do. And to make matters worse, I was away from Vince and Wilson at that time.
I was under the impression that doing the artwork is very fast. I had once asked Mel how long it takes to do a facial expression, and he told me it would take only a minute. So I believe him, and if the face takes 1 minute, the body probably 2 to 3 minutes. But we forgot about the process of turning the sketch into a soft copy, a digital version. We had to clean it up, we had to outline it, we had to color it. Those kind of processes really took us a lot of time to complete.
At one point, I was helping out Mel with the props, and we were actually still very slow. Vince was asking at one point, saying, why are we even stopping at this one particular chapter for so long? Something's not right, and something didn't really go very well. So we were trying to contact Mel, and at that point, it was really very tough trying to reach him.
As weeks go by, things got worse because during our biggest production time, I keep screwing things up. And the distance between me and Vince and Wilson actually affected me. I started to feel very alone, and it's affecting my personal life. So I decided, hey, why not do some self-reflection? So that's what I did, and I found myself a lot during this time.
It was a difficult time for all of us, so I proposed to Mel, let's get you home. It's much easier if we stay at the same place to get things done.
I heard from Vince and I decided to come back.
We were trying to find out a place where we could all work together, and we found that my place was the right place to work with. So we tested out for 2 weeks, and things didn't really turn out as what we expected. It's the same as though when Mel was not around.
The real problem was that we were isolated, despite the fact that we are working on the same place. Shorties is a very heavy production stage, and we need to sync up to get a lot of things right in order to bring out the humor. From composition to facial expression to body language, and even storing the files, everything would have to be correct. If we needed to work in a very production and assembly line fashion, why not we just lay out our tables in an assembly line fashion? So we put our tables next to each other where we are able to see left and right to see what's correct and what's not. And after we did that, we really came together.
At this point, we were talking about how we're going to delegate all the work, and each of us actually have a specific task that we need to be focused on. For me, I actually take the script and I do up the storyboards.
Once I got the base artwork and composition, what I do is I actually clean up the work, which means shading it and making sure that there's color in the artwork. Once in a while, I actually work on the base artwork as well, and when I'm done, I actually send it to Vince.
By the time the artwork was passed to me, I compile it and I complete it. I basically finish the outline process and the color process, and I size it back and put it into the composition where the comic requires. I put in the dialogue and I find areas where the comic needs to improve, and I sound off to the guys. So despite the fact that we were really efficient, we were still stuck at Wilson's place for the longest of time, and it was at that point we acknowledged that this is a suffering.
That was our routine for months, and during the weekends we would go to Wilson's place and we would just focus on production for the whole day, and that's our weekend. On our weekdays we would work at home, just waiting till the next weekend comes.
We were literally having no life at that point, and I recall Vince was telling me that, during this production time, his hand was hurting. So we just really can't wait to finish this production period.
The thing about pain is that the more it hurts, the more you know you're working towards something. We were at Shorty's 20 for the longest time, and we were stuck over there, and then we go to Shorty's 30 and 40, and eventually it came to an end.
We weren't really very happy when the production for season 1 actually ended, because we knew that this was dragged a long time. It was supposed to end way earlier, and right now we're jumping straight right into production season 2, and no time to rest.
Season 2 was starting, and I think we all had one thing in mind. It's not to repeat the mistakes of season 1. So we were thinking about how do we improve our production time, and we start to realize that we are operating in the highest efficiency already, and maybe it's time to bring new people in to help us out.
When you work for 60 days straight, day and night, manning the mouse, not only for AVA, but in your professional work, your wrist is bound to hurt, your eyes gonna get really tired, your stamina is gonna take a dive down. So we didn't want to feel that way for season 2 production like how we did for season 1. So as best that we could, we went out and looked for help, and I managed to bring in a friend, but that didn't work out too well. But what worked was Mel bringing in his sister.
My sister coming in and helping us out was a successful run because she helped us out a lot in Shorties and MASH.
We were really happy that 2 seasons of production is finally done, because it was done all within a year, and that was the best closure of 2016 for us.
We were excited and all, but we still got MASH, and we haven't finished it since the last run. But we were looking into it and we felt that MASH isn't really where we want it to be at the moment. It still doesn't hit the mark. So we decided to just let go of the current structure and improve it once again. And that will be part of the future plans that we are really excited to do for AVA.
I wanted to look for audience or even like-minded people who actually likes anime, animation, traveling, or even stories that we talk about. And the next best thing that we can think of is to actually produce a podcast and to share stories, behind the scenes and stuff.
We've been thinking about this for a long ass time, and we want our own series of figurines. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I went away to work for a year. And that's the thing about AVA. We want to grow it, but we want to grow it with things that we love. We don't necessarily just want to stay and do comics all the time.
You've been seeing some teasers in shorties that is about music, and it's no secret that heavy metal is something that we are really interested in. The whole idea of AVR gives us a very simple and clear direction of what type of music and what kind of music it's going to be. And someday, you're going to have a chance to listen to it, and we hope that we do have the chance to make it as fast as possible.
We love gaming, PC, console, or even board game. At some nights we actually play Cluedo, Munchkin, or even Avalon board game. Who knows, maybe we'll think about working on a VR card game or even a fighting game. But overall, I think we have good times, bad times, and sometimes even fun times, when producing everything about AVR. And I think that's pretty much a good journey.
The people that made up this team took quite some time to come together. It was hard and it was difficult, but it's always fun when you do things that you really care about and doing it together with people who care too. We hope that in many parts of the world, people find what we do and they like it and they too care about it as well.
We started off as a comic website, and now we're venturing into all these things that we love to do. And we have so many things we want to bring in for the future, and that's what we're working on, the other side.